Welcome to another episode of the Build and Scale Boldly podcast. Today we're going to be talking about why scaling isn't about working harder. And scaling is one of those things that I think a lot of people have fear around. I have been on virtual conferences before, and I was writing a presentation about scaling, for example, and I was told, you got to take that word out of your presentation, take scaling out of your presentation, because the people listening to it, it's kind of a scary word to them. They're really not going to be able to really capture what you were talking about in your presentation if you use that word scaling, because they're just going to check out. And so I know that scaling is one of those topics that a lot of people have fear around. And I hear it all the time, actually, that scaling sounds overwhelming. Maybe I just want to keep my business really small. Maybe I don't want to grow your business. I don't want to lose control. Maybe I'm not quite ready to scale or grow my business. And what I really want to talk about this episode is why scaling isn't something to fear and something to embrace instead, right? Scaling, because it means more impact on your customers, your clients. It means creating more change in the world. And we're going to talk about how to scale effectively. We're going to talk about the 3 things that you need to do to be able to scale. Now, if you want to have more impact, help more people, build a business that runs with more ease, then learning to scale is really non-negotiable, because otherwise you just stay a solopreneur and you just continue to trade your time for money. When you build a business that's scaled, when you have employees, then all of a sudden you're shifting. You have a lot more ability to have geometric growth. So scaling is really an important skill that I think is so important. That's why I really wanted to focus this podcast on it today. Okay, so first of all, I wanted to talk about, what scaling isn't. Scaling doesn't mean you're working harder. And I want to get that out of the way right away. It doesn't mean that you're going to go to burnout. You can actually scale your business, meaning you can grow your business well beyond you, build a team, and you can do this by becoming more efficient. So scaling is really about efficiency. It's about efficiency of you. It's about efficiency of your systems. And it's also about efficiency of your team. And that's what allows you to be able to grow your business. One of my mentors, Keith Cunningham, always said, hey, this is not about cranking the hand crank faster and doing more work yourself. It's about building the machine that makes your business grow. And that's what we're talking about today, is building that machine. Now, there are 3 places that you really need to scale when you're scaling your business. You've got to scale your systems, you've got to scale your team, and you have to scale yourself in your time. And so I'm going to go through each of those and talk through how to scale them and give you some tangible examples of what you can be doing and some tools that will help you be able to scale a little bit more efficiently and effectively. So number 1 is scaling your systems. You cannot scale when you're running in chaos. You cannot scale if you don't have everything written down and there's not templates and formulas that people need to follow. Otherwise, if everything is in your head, you cannot scale because nobody else knows what to do. And I remember about a year into semi-retired MD, we hired a director of operations. And at that point, the business had largely been Kenji and I operating the business. And we had all these things in our head of how we knew things needed to run and what needed to be done, but we had never gone down and built those systems. And so one of the things he did was sat down with us for a couple hours in the very beginning, multiple times, and said, okay, so when this happens, what happens next? What happens next? And really just took stock of all the steps that needed to happen, all the softwares that were involved in every step, so that it was a clear pattern and system now for all the things that needed to happen. Another way you could refer to this is a value chain. So a value chain is kind of a map of sorts of all the things that need to happen for a specific task maybe to get done or a particular project to be launched. And so what you can see with a value chain is there is a task, it's assigned to an individual, then maybe it moves to the next step. Maybe that same individual does that next step. Maybe the next step, they hand it off to somebody else, and then that person hands the next step off to somebody else. So a value chain really has multiple players and it has multiple tasks to be able to take a project to completion. And that is a system. And when you have a system created like that, then somebody else can take that system and they can go and they can repeat it over and over again. And ideally, what they can even do is see where it could be done more efficiently or effectively and maybe take out some steps. That would be ideal, or take out some steps where different individuals switching is there, because that can lead to things being dropped if the task is not transferred appropriately. And then make that make that value chain, that system better over time to actually be more efficient. And that's called CANI, which is constant and never-ending improvement. And so that's the goal. The goal is to create those systems, have them really clearly outlined, and then make them better over time. So what are some of the tools that can help you to do that? Project management software. This is a big one for us. So very early on in our business, we invested in Monday.com. And Monday.com is project management software that allows you to see all the steps and it allows you to automate. So those automations now is going to make things more efficient and effective. And then also allows different team members to be assigned steps, put in different due dates, have somebody comment in the project management software so that everyone can see that comment of where that step is at. And so rather than going back and forth in emails where things tend to get lost, I really think a project management software for any business is that has teams, that has beyond you. And honestly, even with just you as an individual, as a solopreneur, having that project management software there very, very early on will make sure all the steps are kind of laid out and really structured and allow for you to very easily be able to bring in team members and say, hey, you're responsible for these steps. Another really important software or tool that you can use is something like Loom. There are a lot of video software out there where you can record yourself doing a process step by step and then be able to save that video for your team members to be able to look at. Even better now is to take the transcript from that video, put it into ChatGPT, or some of the video softwares actually have this built into what they offer, where the transcript can turn into an SOP. And then you could review that SOP, so have an outline of all the steps that need to happen, and then you can edit it however it needs to be edited, and then you have that process, right? You have that task. So let's say you hire somebody, maybe a virtual assistant or a US-based person, you can literally hand them over and say, hey, this is the process. This is how it's done. Here's the SOP for it. Here's the video for how I do it. And again, you want to give them the freedom that over time, if they find a better way to do it, that they can modify it, and then they can do that, right? They can repeat the video with a new process and they can create a new updated SOP. And that way things get better over time. It's not just repeatedly doing the same thing over and over again that you've always done. So again, these tools are really about allowing you to transfer knowledge so different members of your team can see how you do something or see how somebody else does something and take over that task and be able to flawlessly execute it based on the information that was there, either in the video, in the SOP. And also keep in mind, this is really great for you because sometimes you have to change out team members, right? Somebody will quit or somebody will leave or somebody's not working. And all of a sudden you have to get a new team member and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to spend all this time training them on how to do these tasks. No, actually, all the tasks are laid out and already there's video and SOPs on them. You literally can hand it over and they can get up and running in a fraction of the time, whereas you used to have to spend all that time training them. It's not to say that you're not going to train them at all, but it will save you a ton of time as you switch out different members of your team. And I know this is a mistake I've made so many times in the past. That's why it's so important for you guys. I've been through multiple executive assistants, as I was mentioning in an earlier podcast. And in the beginning, I was too lazy to set out the systems that needed to be followed for the executive assistant. And I kept kind of hoping somebody was going to save me, like they were going to set it up for me. Nobody did. So eventually I was like, okay, that's it. So I sat down and I created all the SOPs for all the repeatable tasks that my executive assistant needed to be able to do and put them all in a Monday board and put all the other information they needed in the Monday board for all the different contacts like air conditioners and all people and all this service people. And my new executive assistant came in and within a week, 2 weeks, she was like flawless. She understood all the basic tasks that needed to be done and was just executing left and right. And then as a marker of a really good team member, she was like, hey, I'd like to modify this to change this system because I think it could be done better this way, or I'd like to take this template that you created and make it better this way. And everything became better from what I initially handed her and is updated, right? And so now there's all the SOPs. And so if she goes on vacation or whatever, and I need somebody to fill in for something, I have that ability of being able to say, hey, can you cover this for me really quickly? I really need a meetup. Can you set up the forms for the meetup? Because there's an SOP with links to all the forms right there in my main executive assistant Monday board. Now, another thing to mention is AI tools. AI has been so incredible in changing how operations can kind of be built. Monday project management software and any other project management software you have obviously has a lot of AI tools in it and is just making things more efficient. But ChatGPT has been a big one. If you don't even know where to start, that's a great place to go in and say, hey, I want to create an SOP for whatever. And, as a head of operations, can you show me where you would even start, or ask me the questions that I would need to answer for you to know how to build this for me? So use AI, use it to automate things, use it to kind of summarize. You can take all of your recordings. We now use Fathom. It creates all these scripts with even some summary points. You could take the recordings or the transcripts. You can put it into ChatGPT. You can get all kinds of SOPs from that. I think AI is going to just become better and better at being your partner in creating systems and improving systems over time. Okay, next we're going to talk about scaling your team. And the key is you cannot scale alone. When you are doing all of the work, when you are a solopreneur, there is a limit, right? Because you have a limit of time. Now you can become more efficient with AI and systems, but even that at some point you're going to reach a limit. So you're going to need to bring in team members, and you're going to need to scale by adding more people who can take off some of the tasks. And so you have to hire. You have to learn to hire. It's like one of those things that I think a lot of us avoid for a long time. Maybe we feel overwhelmed. We don't even know where to start, but it's really important skill to get. And as a CEO, you have to learn how to hire, and you have to learn how to lead a team. Now, this is not just about bringing people in and having them do a set of tasks. If you were listening to me just a minute ago, I was really talking about allowing some freedom and kind of empowering people to make systems better over time. And so you really want to bring people in and empower them to be able to think like an owner almost, and think about how to make things better, and have that ability to speak up and be encouraged to speak up about things they can see can be done better, and to fix it themselves. And ideally they get to the point that they're doing things better than you could even do them. That's the ideal. Even if they get to the point that they're doing things 80% of how you do them, that's still better than you doing everything. So you may have to accept that nobody can do something just as good as you, but if they're getting to 80%, that's pretty damn good. And it's freeing you up to be able to do the higher value tasks. So to some extent, you just have to accept that 80%. But there will be some instances where you will bring people in who have a skill set already, or just have a natural inclination towards things. One of the things that we do in our business is we do disc profiles for everybody. So we have a sense of their personalities and what gives them energy. And so what we can see is, let's say a bookkeeper that we hire really has a real drive for conscientiousness and having structure and being in the details and in the weeds. That person's going to be lit up by those kind of activities, whereas I'm not. And so that individual is going to be much better at bookkeeping than I'm going to be, not because I'm incapable of doing it, but because I won't spend as much time. I won't really have the passion for it. And so I'm just not going to do it as well as them. And so that's the goal, is that you have a lot of people on your team who are better than you in doing their tasks than you would be. And so when you bring people on, you want to train them well. I mentioned earlier that even having SOPs is not enough. You want to make sure that they really understand the tasks they've been given, the outcome that they've been given to achieve, and make sure there's clarity around that outcome, that they understand exactly what winning looks like. You also want them to not be just handed tasks and kind of like abdicate responsibility. You still want to lead them and allow them to ask questions, allow them to get feedback. I mentioned earlier that with my EA, I just thought someone was going to come save me. And I can't tell you how many times I've outsourced something to an expert and said, okay, they're going to know the answer. They're going to figure this out. I don't have to do a lot of the active thinking, and it just doesn't work out that way. You still have to be very active. You still have to be in the space where, you hand off a task, but you make sure that they are doing it well, and give them that guidance and coaching initially to make sure that there's quality work. And I also think another thing that's really helpful culture-wise is to have a culture of ownership. And this is one of the things that we do in all of our businesses. Is one of our core values is ownership. And that's the individual taking responsibility and taking pride and doing the best quality work that they can, and owning the result, owning the outcome. That's really a big part. And so if you have people on your team who you've trained and who really own the result, you get different outcomes, you get different results because of that ownership that they have. And so what I do in the team, even when I'm interviewing people and I'm talking to them about what ownership looks like, and one of our other values is solution oriented, I always tell them, hey, in this company, what we do is if we see a problem, I don't want you to just bring that problem to me. I want you to come to me with 3 solutions, 3 potential solutions you come up with for that problem. Your favorite solution of all of those and why that is your favorite solution, so that you're doing a lot of the thinking up front because you have more context than me. And so when you give me that background of all those solutions, the kind of the pros and cons of them and why you think one is better than the other ones, you're giving me a lot more of that context that, I wouldn't necessarily have up front, and I can make better decision making. And what I really understand then with interacting with the really stellar members of my team is a lot of times they bring me a problem and they bring all these pieces and I just end up writing yes in the email. And so if I find myself repeatedly getting emails about things or getting, tagged in Monday about something and I just write yes, sounds great, then I know that that person is really doing their job at the highest level because they are bringing me 3 solutions. They're giving me enough context that I understand the pros and cons of all those solutions. They're telling me which one they think is the best one and why, and it makes sense and there's logical thinking and it's thinking that I would have done too. Then I know that person is really succeeding and doing really, really well at their job. So another thing you really want to think about with your team is that your level of leadership is appropriate for that team member. Initially, maybe when you hire somebody, and especially if they're, working directly with you, and, the cases for your managers too, initially when they hire somebody who's working directly with them, they might give you a lot of step-by-step tasks and show them how to do things step-by-step. But as you gain trust, as you grow your business, you're probably not going to have that ability to go so in depth with individuals. And what you're really looking for is at some point over, maybe it takes some time. It will take some time. You go from leading them that way to eventually get to the point where they're really independent, right? They have problems, they solve them. Maybe they consult you, or maybe they just report out this is already solved. And they've been trained to think like you, or they've been trained in the business and they have been given enough responsibility and trust because they've proven themselves that they really can be able to solve those problems themselves. So that's kind of the goal, is to eventually get to that point. And at that point, you become an owner, right? And you have team members who you can trust to see a problem, to understand all the solutions, to make the right choice that's good for the company. And ideally, again, not everyone is in their own little, space. They're actually interacting with each other, all the other members of your team, helping each other see blind spots, helping each other see other perspectives, having those discussions maybe with you. And then that allows them to make better and better decisions over time and allows you to be able to trust them that they're going to be able to make those decisions. Finally, there's scaling yourself. So more often than not, as a business owner, you are the bottleneck. When you're a solopreneur, you're obviously the bottleneck. But even when you have a team, a lot of the times you're the bottleneck. And part of that is because you're living in, a very early level of leadership, right? You're micromanaging or overseeing every single little step. When your business has grown beyond that, and you really shouldn't be in the weeds like that anymore. And I can tell you how many times I have made these same mistakes, so I want to normalize it for sure. But what you want to ask is, are there things that you're doing right now that could be offloaded to somebody else and that would free you up to do those higher value tasks? So what are you doing right now that somebody else could do better? Maybe it's something that you don't really like, you're not passionate about, and you're not really good at. Why are you doing that? Could you hand that off to somebody else who could do it better? Or maybe they're faster than you, right? Maybe they are better at technology and AI than you, and they could actually figure this out much faster than you, and you could hand it off. And not only would it be the same quality, but it actually would be just faster. Maybe you need to ask yourself, am I doing the work that's the highest value work? So as a CEO, if you have a team, a lot of times the highest value work is creating relationships and being the public face and doing outreach. Maybe it's sales. That's usually the highest value work. It's not sitting and, micromanaging Monday boards or going in and getting involved in every little fire drill. Maybe maybe you're still very much stuck in the weeds, and this is a transition from solopreneur to running a team that you have to make. And I can't say it's always easy for everybody. It's truly a challenge for a lot of people to be able to transition from being in the weeds, doing it all themselves, to trusting and to building the confidence in their team and also training up their team to get to the point that they can shift and do the highest value activities and the ones that give them energy. Right? The ones that fill you, the ones that make you excited, the ones that make you want to keep going. And then you also should think about buying back your time and think about the equation, right? If there's something that you're good at and you really like, but it's a $25 an hour activity, can you give that to somebody who's a $25 an hour resource? Do you really need to be doing it anymore? And, sometimes you might even think of it a little bit stronger because just to shock yourself, which is you're stealing from the business. You're stealing from the business if you're doing an activity that could be done by somebody else just as well for less than you're doing it. Then you really need to remember you are stealing from the business, and that's not okay. And remember to train all of your team members to also think this way, because they also should be very frequently assessing what they're doing and whether or not those activities could be handed off to a cheaper resource per dollar per hour, and maybe elevating and taking things off of your list, which would then free you up to do even the higher value activities. So it kind of builds up when you're thinking through how to do things more effectively, both for yourself and buying back your own time, and then have your managers, your leadership team also thinking that way, so that they're making sure they delegate and elevate all with some frequency, right? This is not something you do once every year. This is something you do with some frequency, is really ask yourself, am I doing the highest value activities, or are there things I can hand off that other people could do better or faster? And, where do I need to be buying back my time now? Maybe by hiring more people or by handing off some tasks that somebody else has capacity to take on to free yourself to do the higher value activities. And then lastly, also say no, right? Saying no to the things that really aren't the priorities, not trying to do it all. Again, I'm not saying this is always easy. I have fallen into these traps so many times, but saying no is a really important skill that you need to have as a CEO, and really staying focused on the most important priorities, making sure you're constantly moving those forward rather than trying to do 50 things at once. Honestly, when you are learning to be a CEO and you are doing everything and you're holding on to doing everything and you're not willing to trust yet, you're costing your business growth, you're costing your business tremendously. There's a saying, the chokehold on every business is the psychology of the owner. And that is so true, because this is a psychology of like, I can do it best. Let me hold on to it. Let me not hand it off to anybody else. So just a quick recap, scaling does not mean you're working harder. It means you're growing your business, but you're doing so more efficiently, right? And you can become more efficient by leveraging others, by leveraging more systems, and by leveraging yourself and leveraging your time. And this is how you scale without adding a lot of stress to your life. And this is how you become an owner and not just an operator. Okay. And then lastly, I wanted to leave you guys with a reflection question. What's one area in your business that's ready to scale, but you've maybe been holding back out of risk of fear or perfectionism, and you're just scared? Do a little bit of thought work around that. Feel free to share it with a community or email us, and we'd love to hear it. Now, if you found today's episode helpful, I'd love for you to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and share it with a friend, right, who's building their business and really wants to learn more about being a CEO. The more bold women we lift up, the more we change the game together. So keep dreaming big, keep leading boldly, and most of all, keep building the business and life you love.